Why are there so many weak and whiny Americans? We got a whopping 4 inches of snow, but the amount of whining and complaining is just unbelievable. You know, I was in the Philippines. We took a direct hit in Melanie's village from a category 4. Everybody just kind of started cleaning things up. They didn't have power, but you just didn't hear all the whining.
Welcome in to another episode of Foreigner Loves Filipina.
Why are there so many weak and whiny Americans? As you can see, we recently had a snow. We got a whopping 4 inches of snow. Now, we did have sleet, so it is a hard-packed snow, you know, more almost like ice. But the amount of whining and complaining and how am I going to get out, it's just unbelievable. And they can't get out because the road hasn't been plowed of the 4 inches. Or if it has been plowed, then they whine, oh, well, the city left a pile of snow at the end of my driveway. And of course, this was supposed to be a giant snowstorm. It was supposed to be 22 inches of snow. About 5 or 6 days before the storm, they said it was going to be 22 inches. Ended up being 4. Imagine if we'd had 22 inches. And we had no power outages. You know, they were calling for widespread power outages. I just don't understand how many people can't deal with the smallest problem, the smallest inconvenience, and are just lost if everything isn't just perfect. I just don't see that as an American trait. You know, we're kind of rugged, independent, settled. We settled the West. The frontiersmen. But I just feel like that has been lost. You know, I was in the Philippines. We took a direct hit in Melanie's village from a category 4 hurricane or typhoon. And, you know, it tore down all the power lines. They didn't have power for weeks. But you know what? The next morning, everybody got up. Everybody just kind of started cleaning things up. They didn't have power, but you just didn't hear all the whining and complaining and the, oh, how's the government going to help me? How's the government going to solve all my problems? You know, people have become so helpless and so dependent on the government should solve every problem and every inconvenience you have, the government should solve it. And the thing that's most alarming is most of the people that I see complaining and bitching, they're young people. They're in their 20s, they're in their 30s. These aren't elderly people or disabled people. I mean, they're able-bodied people that should be able to solve a fairly minor problem and have the physical strength to do it. There was one guy who posted, he lives right down the street from me. He posted a picture of his car. He's parked on the side of the road and they had plowed around. And so, you know, he had the snow around his car and he was going to offer someone $100 to come dig him out. And the guy, he looked like he was probably 30 years old. It's a different world than when we grew up, isn't it? I mean, it's a different world than when we grew up. It is interesting because, you know, of course, people, when you're in an age gap relationship, they're always like, well, what do you have in common? And what are you going to talk about? You know, I talk more with Melanie than I think I ever did with my ex-wife, who was, you know, around my age. And I think Melanie and I have a lot in common. We both love family. Family is important to us. We both love the Philippines. We both love traveling. I don't know that age has a whole lot to do with what you have in common and what you don't have in common. But the people who are immediately repulsed by age gap and find it offensive and just assume that there's no way you can have anything in common, that you could have anything to talk about. I hope our videos, if nothing else, kind of dispel that you can have plenty to talk about. We even like watching a lot of the same shows, same movies, a lot of the same shows we enjoy together. We enjoy the same music. Luckily, Filipinos generally like kind of our older music, like from when we were growing up. I don't know if you guys have found that, but I know Melanie loves, you know, kind of the music I grew up with in the 70s and 80s. So when you're in an age gap relationship, having something to talk about, having something in common is not a problem. Now, when she gets on her phone and she starts watching all her short videos, those are something I would have no interest in. But if she was my age and she was doing that, it would be the same thing. Obviously, the girly stuff I'm not interested in. And she does have her relationship shows, just those kind of nasty dating shows they have on TV. I have no interest in watching those. But the vast majority of stuff we love. We have a lot of stuff we watch together. Something else we have in common is we both like alone time too. So while we love being together and spending time together, we both enjoy some time by ourselves. So when we're at home, sometimes she's sitting right there next to me. We're all cuddled up together watching a show. Other times she's sitting on the other side of the room. She's doing her thing and I'm doing my thing. And like days like today when I go play poker, she's off because of the snow. She'll be as happy and content as she can be, having the whole day just to watch her shows and do her thing, and I'll be happy. So luckily, that's something we have in common. If I had a woman in my life who needed me to be around her 24/7, I would really struggle with that. It's just not my nature. I be honest, I'm really deep inside, I'm really a loner. Back in my 20s, I was a loner to the point of it actually being almost dysfunctional. I really went through this phase in my 20s that I would, work, and so I interacted with people at work, but then I would go home and like on a weekend, I could literally not talk to a single soul the entire weekend. And I would be as happy and content as I could be. I still love to hike, but I really loved hiking back then. I'd go up in the mountains and I didn't feel lonely. I loved my alone time. But I will say it became a little bit dysfunctional because I got to where I really didn't know how to interact with people on a social level. I could do it on a business level. I always did pretty well in business and at work because it's just an area I was always focused on. I was like, okay, if I got to do Chit Chat at work, I'll do Chit Chat. In fact, I remember my first major job I got in my early 20s, the first like real career type job, ended up being my career, the path I was in my entire career. And it drove me crazy at first because I was very driven and very just task oriented, wanted to get things done. Well, particularly down here in the South, I grew up in New York State, but down here in the South, it's a little more social and the old buddy system, and everybody wants to chat and talk. And I struggled because I was a project manager, and so obviously I had projects, and it was very deadline driven, and I had to answer to my customers, but I would go to people who would run different divisions of our plant to try to get things done. And you had to go in there and shoot the shit with them for 15 minutes before you could ever talk about what you were actually there for. And I just hated that. I'm like, I just want to get things done. And I just learned that, okay, part of getting the job done is doing small talk with people. And if I don't, I'm not going to get anything done because they don't want to work with me and they find me difficult to deal with. And I remember, since I grew up in New York, when nobody up there was into NASCAR. Well, down here, NASCAR was huge back then. This was in the early 90s. So I decided I've got to have a NASCAR car driver that I pull for, just so I have something to talk to these people about when we go out for lunch or when we go play golf or whatever we're going to do, because that's all they talked about was NASCAR. So Jeff Gordon became my guy. He was real popular at the time. I didn't care about Jeff Gordon. I didn't care about NASCAR. I did care about having my business relationships and having friends. And I was like, the only way I can do this is I have to be able to talk NASCAR. So I would, on Sundays, a lot of times, that was back when I was a real church-going guy, and we'd go to church and come home, And I'd lay down on the couch. This is when my kids were real little. And I would put the race on, and it was really just so the roar of the cars would make me take a Sunday afternoon nap. And I would pay a little of attention so that I would have something to talk to people about the upcoming week. But I didn't care about it at all. But it became a functional part of trying to do my job and interact with, the guys that live down here. We all have to adapt to our surroundings, That was me adapting to my surroundings. I don't understand the tattoos thing, though. I will admit, I have no tattoos. I've never had any desire to get a tattoo. The only time I maybe came a little close to getting a tattoo, like I said, one of my best friends is a tattoo artist, and he's tattooed all three of my boys. And all three of my boys have a chest tattoo. It's a brother tattoo, so they all have the same tattoo, which is pretty cool that they all did that. Well, my buddy, he knows I'm not into tattoos and I don't understand the fascination with tattoos. So he was trying to convince my kids to talk me into doing it. He was telling them, I think your dad would do it. I think your dad would do it. And they were like, no, Dad would never do it. The facts are, had they asked, I probably would have. Particularly back then, because that was back when I was still having a lot of strain with my kids. I did have a viewer ask me yesterday why I'm still in the U.S., why I haven't moved to the Philippines. And he was asking if it was so that Melanie would have Social Security benefits. And then he said that for a foreign-born spouse to get your Social Security benefits, that she has to have lived in the U.S. for 5 years, which I had never heard. He sent me a whole bunch of information on it that I haven't had an opportunity to go all the way through. I may actually try to see about maybe trying to do an episode about it. I was not aware of that. I had done a little research about the survivor benefits because obviously I want Melanie to get those when I'm gone. And I'm planning to delay my Social Security probably all the way to 70 if I can, because then it would mean bigger benefits for Melanie. And, Melanie would be able to live very comfortably back in the Philippines on my Social Security benefits. So I thought that was interesting. I'm going to do more research on that. I don't know if any of you guys ever heard that. That's was news to me. And I've never heard any other vlogger talk about that either. Do you guys have any vloggers you watch simply because you hate them or you don't like them? I might be that guy for you. I don't know, but I have one vlogger that I watch almost every one of his episodes just because I can't stand him. And I just think he's so bad at vlogging, for one thing, and he thinks he's so awesome, and he's always talking about how awesome he is, that I get a chuckle out of it. So here I am, I got this guy I really can't stand, and I think he's terrible at vlogging. I find his vlogs so boring, but I end up watching almost all of them because I just love to hate them. I love to hate them. If you love to hate me, guys, that's okay. Just keep tuning in. We all have someone we love to hate.